was not a hero. He was not brave or special or important. He was just a maintenance engineer from New Chicago, a man who fixed broken pipes and faulty wiring in the underground shelters where the last of humanity lived. Earth was dying. Everyone knew it. The air was poison, the water was running out, and the sun seemed angry and red through the thick clouds of dust that never went away. When the colony ship Perseverance announced it needed volunteers for a one-way trip to a distant planet, signed up on the first day. He had no wife, no children, no family left alive. His parents had died in the Great Collapse. His sister had disappeared during the food riots. There was nothing holding him to Earth except memories, and memories were not enough. The ship would carry 10,000 sleeping colonists across 112 years of empty space. They would sleep in special pods that kept their bodies frozen in time. When they woke up, they would be on a new world called 442b. A fresh start. A second chance for humanity. Remembered the day he climbed into his pod. The doctors told him to relax. They told him he would feel cold for just a moment, then nothing at all. He would close his eyes on Earth and open them on a new home. He closed his eyes. He expected to wake up surrounded by other colonists, breathing fresh air, looking at an alien sky full of strange stars. He did not expect to wake up in chains. The first thing felt was pain. His whole body hurt like he had been beaten. His head was pounding. His mouth was dry. He tried to move his arms, but something cold and heavy held them down. He opened his eyes and saw darkness at first, then slowly, shapes began to form. He was in a room made of something that looked like black glass. The walls curved in strange ways that made his head hurt even more. Lights floated in the air without any visible source, and standing in front of him were creatures that were definitely not human. They were tall, almost 7 feet, with skin that shifted between deep purple and silver depending on how the light hit them. Their faces were almost human, but sharper, more angular, with cheekbones that could cut glass and eyes that had no whites, just pools of liquid silver. They had 4 fingers on each hand, and their movements were smooth and precise, like dancers or predators. One of them stepped forward. This one was different from the others. She wore robes of deep crimson that seemed to flow like water around her body. A crown of floating metal pieces orbited her head slowly. Her silver eyes studied with an intensity that made him feel like a bug under a microscope. "So," she said, and her voice carried sounds that human throats could never make, like music and thunder mixed together. "This is what a human male looks like. The selection algorithm chose interestingly." Tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. He coughed and tried again. "Where am I? What happened to the ship, the other colonists?" The creature tilted her head slightly. Something translated his words for her because she seemed to understand perfectly. "Your vessel was intercepted by the Sovereignty 89 years into its journey. The other humans are safe, preserved in storage. They are unharmed." Storage pulled against his chains. "You mean pods?" "We mean storage." Her tone was flat. "Your species is classified as feral, intelligent but uncontacted, primitive. Under sovereignty law, you have no legal protection or rights. You and your kind are property." The words hit like a physical blow. Property. They had been captured and stored like animals, like cargo. Everything humanity had dreamed about, the new beginning, the second chance, it was all gone in an instant. "Then why am I here?" asked. "Why did you wake me up?" The creature's expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted. Was it amusement, curiosity? He could not tell. "Because the selection algorithm chose you." She gestured, and a floating screen appeared in the air, showing complex symbols and patterns could not understand. "For 4,000 years, the algorithm has identified compatible genetic and psychological matches for the imperial bloodline. It has never been wrong. It has never failed. And when we scanned the humans in storage, it identified you as a match." Stared at her. His brain was working slowly, still foggy from the long sleep, but he understood what she was saying. A match for what? For me. The creature straightened, and her presence seemed to fill the entire room. I am 47th Empress of the Sovereignty, ruler of 12 star systems and guardian of the sacred flame, and you human have been selected as my consort. For a long moment could not think of anything to say. Then, despite everything, despite the chains and the pain and the terror, he laughed. It was a broken, desperate sound. You have got to be joking. The Empress did not laugh. Do not joke about the selection. It is our most sacred tradition. I'm a maintenance engineer, said. I fix toilets, I replace light bulbs, I am nobody. You are what the algorithm chose. The Empress turned away, her robes flowing behind her. The scanning process kills 30% of candidates. You survived. The compatibility rating is the highest recorded in 300 years. Whatever you are, human, you are not nobody. Not anymore. She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at him over her shoulder. My advisors tell me you are primitive, weak, unworthy. They say the algorithm must be malfunctioning for the first time in history. Her silver eyes seemed to glow. Prove them wrong or you will die here forgotten, while your species remains in storage forever. Then she was gone, and was alone in the dark room, chained to a wall, further from Earth than any human had ever been, with the weight of his entire species suddenly resting on his shoulders. He had gone to sleep alone, running from a life with no meaning. He had awakened as the Empress's selected consort. And somehow, impossibly, the second option seemed worse. Closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Okay, he thought, okay, I'm a prisoner, I'm a slave. An alien Empress apparently wants to marry me, and the fate of 10,000 humans depends on me not screwing this up. He had faced worse odds. Actually, no, he had never faced anything even close to this. But humans were stubborn. It was basically their whole thing. They survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and the slow death of their own planet. One engineer from New Chicago was not going to let his species down. He would learn, he would adapt, he would survive. And somehow, someway, he would find a path forward. It was what humans did. It was called Prime, and it was the most beautiful place had ever seen. It was also the most terrifying. The cities floated in the sky, held up by technology so advanced it looked like magic. Buildings grew from crystal and living metal, their shapes constantly shifting and changing like slow-moving clouds. Rivers of light flowed through the air instead of water, and the sky itself had 3 suns and 2 moons that painted everything in colors that did not exist on Earth. Saw all of this through the windows of his quarters, which was really just a fancy prison cell. It had soft beds and floating furniture and food that tasted better than anything he had ever eaten. But the door only opened when his guards allowed it, and the windows would not break no matter how hard he hit them. He had tried, many times. His main guard was a warrior named. He was shorter than most of his kind, with scars on his face and a permanent look of disappointment in his silver eyes. He never spoke more than necessary. He brought his meals, escorted him to language lessons, and watched him with the bored attention of someone assigned to babysit a particularly uninteresting animal. "Why you?" asked him one day. "You are a warrior. Guarding a prisoner seems below your rank." His jaw tightened. "It is a punishment." "For what?" "For failing." Did not explain further and did not push. He was learning that the respected silence and patience. They thought humans talked too much and too fast about things that did not matter. So learn to watch and listen instead. He watched the servants who brought his food, noticing how some of them lingered too long at his door. He watched the guards who patrolled the hallways, noticing how one of them carried a weapon with non-standard modifications. He watched the nobles who occasionally came to stare at him like he was an exhibit in a zoo, and he noticed how they grouped together in factions, whispering in corners, their silver eyes full of ambition and hate. The sovereignty was not a happy empire. It was a powder keg waiting to explode. The Empress learned was surrounded by enemies. Three great noble houses wanted her throne. House, the oldest and proudest, believed they had a better claim to rule. House, the most distant, wanted independence and their own empire. And there was a third faction, hidden in the shadows, that seemed to want nothing less than chaos itself. The previous two candidates chosen by the selection algorithm had died under mysterious circumstances. One had fallen from a balcony. One had been poisoned. The official reports called them accidents. Nobody believed the official reports. Was supposed to be next. He realized this slowly over weeks of watching and learning. The selection of a human, a primitive feral creature, was not just unusual. It was a scandal. It was an insult to every noble house that had offered their own sons and daughters for the honor. It suggested that the sacred algorithm, the foundation of tradition, was broken or corrupted. If died, the scandal would go away. The algorithm would be blamed, not the conspirators, and the Empress would be forced to choose a proper consort from the noble houses, strengthening their position. It was elegant. It was ruthless. It was exactly what would expect from a civilization of apex predators who had conquered 12 star systems. He needed allies, but how could a prisoner with no rights, no power, and no understanding of this world possibly find allies? The answer came from an unexpected place. One night, a servant brought his dinner and whispered a single word in broken human English before leaving. Careful. Did not eat the food that night. The next morning found him alive and looking well-rested, and something in the warrior's eyes changed. Just a flicker, but saw it. He started paying attention to the servants. They were invisible to the nobles beneath notice, just part of the background, but they saw everything. They heard everything, and some of them realized were not happy with their masters. He began learning their names. He thanked them for his meals. He asked about their families, their lives, their dreams. The nobles never did this. To them, servants were furniture that happened to move. They were people. And people, no matter what species they were, responded to being treated with respect. Information began to flow. Small things at first, which nobles were meeting in secret, what messages were being passed in the corridors, which guards could be bribed and which were loyal. Built a picture of the conspiracy piece by piece, like assembling a puzzle in the dark. And then came the ceremony. It was a formal presentation, a ritual where the consort designate was shown to the court for the first time, was dressed in formal clothes that felt strange against his skin. He was led into a great hall filled with thousands of aliens who looked at him with contempt, curiosity, or cold calculation. The Empress sat on a throne of floating crystal, beautiful and distant as a star. She did not look at as he was presented. She did not acknowledge him at all. Then everything happened very fast. A scream, a flash of light, a child running across the floor chased by something that looked like a small flying blade. The Empress's niece learned later, 6 years old, a target that no one would expect. The guards were too slow. The nobles were too shocked. The blade was too fast. Moved without thinking. He threw himself forward, grabbed the child, and twisted his body to shield her. The blade hit his shoulder instead of her throat. Pain exploded through him like fire. He fell. The child clutched against his chest, his blood spreading across the crystal floor. When he looked up, the Empress was staring at him. For the first time, her silver eyes held something other than cold calculation. Surprise, confusion, and underneath it all, something that might have been the beginning of respect. Why? She asked later when he was being treated by healers. She is not your blood, she is not even your species. Why would you risk your life for her? Thought about the question. His shoulder hurt. His head was foggy from whatever painkillers they had given him, but he tried to answer honestly. Because she was a child, he said, and she was scared, and I was there. That is what humans do, we help, even when it costs us, even when it makes no sense. The Empress stared at him for a long moment. "Your species is strange," she said finally. "Yeah," agreed, "we really are." She left without another word, but noticed that his guards were doubled the next day, not to keep him prisoner but to keep him safe. It was not much, it was not trust, but it was a start. And starts were all needed. He was human. He would find a way to turn this small crack into something bigger. It was what his species did best. 6 months had passed since woke up in chains. He was no longer a prisoner. He was something stranger now, something they had never seen before. He was a variable they could not predict. The noble houses watched him with growing frustration. They had expected him to die quickly, killed by the conspiracy or broken by the weight of his situation. Instead, he survived. He adapted. He did things that made no sense by standards, and somehow those senseless things worked. He made friends with servants. He treated warriors like equals. He asked questions that nobles considered beneath their dignity. He laughed at insults instead of demanding honor duels. He admitted weakness openly, which they saw as shameful, but somehow his honesty made people trust him more. Most confusing of all, he helped people who could offer him nothing in return. A servant's child was sick and stayed up all night helping find a healer. A young warrior failed his trials and sat with him in his shame, talking about human ideas of failure and second chances. An elderly noble lost her husband and attended the funeral even though no one expected him to, standing quietly in the back with his head bowed. These actions made no political sense. They offered no advantage. They could not understand them. But slowly, quietly, they began to change how people saw him. The servants stopped calling him the Pharaoh. The warriors started nodding to him in the corridors. Even some nobles began to speak of him with curiosity instead of contempt. He was strange. He was alien, but he was not what they had expected. And the Empress noticed. She began summoning him for private conversations. At first they were formal and cold. She asked questions about human history, human technology, human psychology. She was studying him, realized, the same way she studied her enemies, looking for weaknesses, looking for patterns, but did not follow patterns. He answered her questions honestly, even when honesty made him look bad. He asked her questions in return, which shocked her because no one else dared to question the Empress about anything. He challenged her assumptions. He disagreed with her conclusions. And slowly the conversations changed. One night, she admitted something she had never told anyone else. "I never wanted this throne," she said. They were sitting in her private garden, surrounded by flowers that glowed like soft fire. Her guards stood at a distance, giving them privacy. "My mother was Empress before me. She was strong, wise, beloved. I was supposed to have more time to learn, to grow, to prepare." "What happened?" asked. The Empress's silver eyes went distant. "She was assassinated, poison hidden in her morning tea. I was 23 years old. I became Empress overnight, surrounded by enemies who saw my youth as weakness. I have spent 15 years fighting to survive. And trusting no one." She looked at him sharply. "Trust is a luxury I cannot afford." "That sounds lonely." The Empress was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Your species has a strange concept. You call it friendship. The idea that you can trust someone simply because you care about them, without political calculation, without expecting anything in return. It is not just a concept," said. "It is how we survive. Humans are not strong alone. We need each other. Trust is not a luxury for us. It is a necessity. And if that trust is broken, then it hurts," admitted. "It hurts more than almost anything, but we trust again anyway. Because the alternative, living alone, never letting anyone close, that is not living at all." The Empress studied him for a long time. Her expression was unreadable. "You are either very wise," she said finally, "or very foolish." "Probably both," agreed. "Humans are complicated." That night something shifted between them. It was not trust, not yet, but it was the beginning of something. A crack in the wall the Empress had built around herself, a glimpse of the person underneath the crown. Also had another breakthrough that night. His network of servants and friendly warriors had finally pieced together the shape of the conspiracy. There were three players. House wanted the throne for themselves. House wanted to break away from the sovereignty entirely. And behind both of them, pulling strings, was someone inside the palace itself. Someone close to the Empress. Someone who had helped plan her mother's assassination 15 years ago. Suspected it was her uncle, a quiet man named who rarely spoke at court and seemed to have no ambitions. He was invisible, unremarkable, the perfect position for a puppet master. But had no proof. And even if he had proof, who would believe a human over a member of the royal family? He needed a plan, not a plan of careful moves and traditional rules. A human plan, something crazy, something unpredictable, something that would break all the patterns the conspirators were expecting. He found in the training yard and explained his idea. The warrior stared at him like he had lost his mind. "You want to let the assassination attempt happen," said slowly. "Yes. You want to let them get close enough to strike, and then turn their own plan against them." "Yes. You realize that you will probably die." Shrugged. "I was supposed to die 6 months ago. I am already on borrowed time. But if this works, I can save the Empress and expose the conspiracy. I can protect the other humans in storage. I can give my species a chance." Was silent for a long time. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. It was a rough, rusty sound like he had not laughed in years. "You humans truly are insane," he said. "It is one of our best features," replied. "The Empress will never agree to this plan." "Then we do not tell her. We protect her without her knowing. We control the battlefield, the timing, the circumstances. We make sure that when the conspirators strike, they strike where we want them to, when we want them to, against targets we have prepared." Shook his head. "It will never work." "Probably not," admitted. "But when has that ever stopped a human?" And despite everything, despite all his training and all his instincts, found himself agreeing. Maybe the human was crazy. But maybe, just maybe, crazy was exactly what this empire needed. The night of the Crimson Ascension was the most sacred ceremony in culture. It was the night when a consort designate officially joined the imperial bloodline. The night when maintenance engineer from a dead planet would become the husband of an alien empress. It was also the night everyone expected him to die. The great temple was filled with 10,000 nobles, warriors, and dignitaries from across 12 star systems. The air smelled of incense that made eyes water. Lights drifted through the massive space like slow-moving stars. The Empress stood at the center of it all, dressed in crimson robes that made her look like a goddess of fire. Walked toward her, step by careful step, wearing the ceremonial clothes of a consort. The clothes felt heavy. His heart was beating too fast. Somewhere in this crowd were assassins waiting to strike. Somewhere were the conspirators who had planned this moment for months. What they did not know was that had been planning too. For 3 months, his network had been feeding false information to the conspiracy. Small changes, subtle adjustments. The assassins thought they knew where the guards would be positioned. They were wrong. They thought they knew the Empress's movements. They were wrong. They thought they had accounted for every variable. They had not accounted for. The ceremony began. The Empress spoke ancient words in a language did not understand. She held out her hand and took it. Her skin was cool and smooth, and for a moment everything else faded away. There was only her silver eyes looking into his, and the strange connection that had grown between them over months of conversations and quiet moments. Then the attack came. It was not what the conspirators had planned. They had expected to strike during the blood ritual, when tradition demanded the Empress be unarmed and unprotected. Instead, the attack happened earlier, in a different location, against a target they had not chosen. Had herded them like sheep, like pieces on a game board. A flash of light, screams, guards rushing toward a disturbance on the left side of the temple, but knew it was a distraction. The real attack was coming from above, from a balcony where a sniper was even now taking aim at the Empress's heart. Except the sniper found waiting for him, instead of an empty perch. The sounds of combat echoed through the temple. The nobles were panicking, pushing toward the exits. The Empress's guards surrounded her, weapons drawn. And in the chaos, three figures emerged from the crowd, moving with purpose. Lord of House, Lady of House, and behind them both, stepping out of the shadows at last, the Empress's uncle, the true architect of 15 years of conspiracy. "Niece," said, his voice carrying across the chaos, "I had hoped it would not come to this, but you have left me no choice. Your selection of this feral creature was the final insult. The algorithm is broken. The old ways are dying. It is time for new leadership." The Empress stood tall, unafraid. "You killed my mother. I freed the sovereignty from weakness," gestured, and 100 armed men emerged from hidden positions. House guards, mercenaries, soldiers who had sold their loyalty. "Surrender and I will let you live. Continue to resist and everyone in this temple dies." It was a solid plan. It might have worked against anyone else, but had not accounted for. "I challenge you," said, stepping forward. The entire temple went silent. Even the armed soldiers stopped moving, confused. Stared at him like he was looking at an insect that had suddenly started speaking. "What?" "I challenge you to an honor duel, one-on-one, your life against mine," kept his voice steady, even though his heart was trying to escape from his chest. "Or are you afraid to face a primitive feral creature?" "You cannot challenge me," said slowly. "You have no rank, no standing. Under our law you are property." "Then I guess you will have to kill an unarmed piece of property in front of 10,000 witnesses," replied. "That should do wonders for your reputation." His face twisted with anger, but had calculated correctly. There were creatures of tradition and honor. Killing someone in battle was acceptable. Killing someone who had offered formal challenge, even a human, was deeply shameful. "I accept," said finally, "though I fail to see what you hope to accomplish." "I am buying time," said honestly. "Your men up there in the balconies, they are not answering to you anymore. My friends have been busy while we talked." His eyes went wide. He looked up and saw a dozen loyal guards standing where his snipers should have been. He looked around and saw his own soldiers hesitating, confused, receiving contradicting orders. "The evidence of your conspiracy is being secured as we speak," continued. "Bank records, message logs, testimony from people you thought were loyal. In a few minutes, everyone in this temple will know exactly what you are. Then I will kill you quickly and deal with the complications later," snarled. He moved. Had known he could not win a fair fight against a warrior. They were faster, stronger, more experienced, had centuries of combat training, and had spent his life fixing broken pipes. The duel lasted 90 seconds, hit him 17 times, broke 3 ribs, lost 2 teeth, and felt his left arm snap like a dry branch. He fell to the crystal floor, tasting blood, vision swimming in and out. But he did not die. He was not supposed to win. He was supposed to survive. In honor duels, surviving against a vastly superior opponent was itself a form of victory. It proved courage. It proved will. It proved something that the respected above almost everything else. Had earned that respect with his blood. Stood over him, breathing hard, weapon raised for the killing blow. "Why?" he demanded. "Why would you do this? She is not your empress. We are not your people. You threw away your life for strangers." Looked up at him through swelling eyes. "Because someone had to," he whispered, "and I was there." Hesitated. It was only a moment, but it was enough. Hold, the Empress commanded. Her voice rang through the temple like a bell. She stepped forward, past her guards, past the chaos, until she stood between N's broken body. The human has shown more honor tonight than you have shown in 15 years, she said. Her voice was cold as deep space. He is worthy of respect. He is worthy of standing beside me. And you, uncle, are worthy only of the punishment reserved for traitors. Tried to run, he did not get far. Later, when the healers were putting back together, the Empress came to see him. She stood beside his bed for a long time, saying nothing. That was the thing I have ever seen, she said finally. Did it work? Asked. Yes, has been arrested. The conspirators are exposed. House and house are fighting each other for the scraps. She paused. You changed everything. Good closed his eyes. Then it was worth it. He felt her hand touch his, very gently. Why? She asked softly. I still do not understand why. Because that is what humans do, said. We help, even when it hurts, even when it makes no sense. We cannot seem to stop ourselves. The Empress was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps, she said, that is why the algorithm chose you. And she stayed beside his bed until he fell asleep. 3 months after the night of the Crimson Ascension, the galaxy had changed. Was executed for treason, his name erased from the records of the imperial family. House lost half their holdings when their involvement in the conspiracy was revealed. House retreated to their distant systems, their dreams of independence crushed. The sovereignty was more united than it had been in centuries, and at the center of that unity stood an unlikely figure. Formerly a maintenance engineer, now imperial consort. He still could not quite believe it himself. The ceremony had been quiet, private, nothing like the chaos of the Crimson Ascension. Just the Empress and a few witnesses in a small temple overlooking the crystal gardens of Prime. The Empress had spoken the ancient words and had spoken them back, his accent terrible but his meaning clear. And then it was done. He was her husband, partner, equal at least in the eyes of the law. Empress came to him that night, after the ceremony, in the private chambers they now shared. She stood by the window, looking out at the 3 moons hanging in the sky, her crimson robes exchanged for something simpler, softer. I have spent 15 years trusting no one, she said quietly. Trusting you terrifies me more than any assassination attempt. Moved to stand beside her. His ribs still ache sometimes, a reminder of his duel with. His left arm worked, but it would never be quite the same. Battle scars, they called them, marks of honor. I am not asking you to trust blindly, he said. Trust is built, slowly, over time, through actions, not words. Is that a human philosophy? It is a philosophy, he smiled slightly. I have been making this up as I go along. Turned to look at him. Her silver eyes were unguarded in a way he had never seen before, vulnerable, real. When I first saw you in that cell, she said, I thought the algorithm had finally failed. A human, a primitive. What could you possibly offer the sovereignty? And now I think the algorithm understood something I did not. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cool and elegant, so different from his rough human hands. You do not think like us. You do not fight like us. You do not love like us. But that difference is exactly what we needed. Thought about that. About all the moments over the past 9 months when his human instincts had been exactly wrong by standards, and yet exactly right for the situation. About the servants who trusted him because he treated them like people. About the warriors who respected him because he faced death without flinching. About the conspiracy he had broken because he did not play by the rules. I have something to tell you, he said. Something I discovered while researching the selection algorithm. His expression sharpened. What? The algorithm has never chosen outside the species before. In 4,000 years, I am the first external selection. I know, my advisors reminded me of this constantly. But do you know why? Took a deep breath. I found the algorithm's analysis logs, the original selection parameters. It was not just looking for genetic compatibility or psychological matching. It was looking for something else, something it predicted the sovereignty would need. Need for what? I do not know exactly. The records are incomplete, but there are references to long-range threat assessments, predictions about something in the dark between galaxies, something that has been growing for thousands of years, something they have been trying to ignore because they did not know how to face it. Was very still, the void silence. You know about it. Every Empress knows about it. We have been receiving strange signals from the edge of known space for centuries. Ships that go to investigate never return. We call it the void silence because we do not know what else to call it. She looked out at the stars. And you believe the algorithm chose you to help us face it. I believe the algorithm chose me because humans are stubborn, said. Because we do not give up. Because when everything seems hopeless, we get creative. Because we do not know when to stop. Whatever is out there in the dark, the algorithm calculated that you would need that human stubbornness to survive it. Was quiet for a long time. Then slowly she smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine, not the careful mask she wore in public. Then I suppose we should start preparing, she said. I suppose we should, squeezed her hand. But first there is something else. What? The humans on the Perseverance, my people. They have been in storage for almost 90 years. They dreamed of a new world, a fresh start. I want to give that to them. The Empress nodded. I have already begun the arrangements. A world has been selected in the outer systems, suitable for human life. They will be given full protectorate status under the sovereignty, not property, citizens. Felt his throat tighten. 10,000 humans saved from slavery, given a home, given a future. Thank you, he whispered. Do not thank me, thank the algorithm. Smile widened slightly. It seems it knew what it was doing after all. They stood together at the window, looking out at the stars. An alien empress and a human engineer, partners against whatever darkness was coming. You know, said after a while, when I went asleep I was running away from everything. I had nothing left. No family, no future, no hope. I thought I was choosing to disappear. And instead I woke up to more than I ever imagined. A purpose, a people to protect, a partner who trusts me despite every reason not to. He shook his head slowly. Funny how that works. Moved closer and felt her lean against him, her head resting on his shoulder. The algorithm chose well, she said quietly. Perhaps it is time we started listening to it. Outside, the 3 moons cast silver light across the crystal gardens. Somewhere in the cold depths of space, the colonists of the Perseverance slept on, dreaming of new worlds. And in the dark between galaxies, something ancient stirred, not knowing that humanity had finally entered the cosmic stage. They were stubborn, they were unpredictable, they did not know when to stop. And that, the algorithm had calculated, would make all the difference. In the years that followed, historians would mark this moment as the beginning of a new era. The era of human integration, the era of alliance and expansion, the era when the sovereignty, guided by an empress and her human consort, began preparing for a threat that would have destroyed them if they had faced it alone. But that night, there were no thoughts of history or destiny or the fate of civilizations. There was just Anne standing together, watching the stars. 2 people from different worlds, learning to trust. It was not a happy ending. It was something better. It was a beginning.